All right, so we're going to go over 9-2, solving quadratic equations by factoring. All right, so this is really just the next step to factoring. So we know how to factor, we learned how to factor. Well, now from factored form, we're going to learn how to solve our equations. So when we're solving for the variable. When solving quadratic equations by factoring, we're going to use what's called the zero product property. So this states for all real numbers, A and B, if A times B equals 0, then either A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0. And so let's look at example 1. So we're going to find the solution of x minus 9 times 5x plus 2 equals 0. Now, this should look familiar. This is already in factored form. So once we're already in factored form, we're going to set each factor equal to 0. So each factor is x minus 9, that's one factor. My other factor is 5x plus 2. So I'm going to take each of those and set them equal to 0. So we have x minus 9 equals 0. And then I also have to set the other one equal to 0. 5x plus 2 equals 0. Once they're both set equal to 0, our next step is to solve for our variable for both factors. So I'm going to look at the x minus 9 first. Well, if I want to solve for x, all we have to do is add 9 to both sides, so x equals positive 9. Well, now I also have to solve my other factor. So to get x by itself, we need to first subtract 2 from both sides. So we get 5x equals negative 2. Then lastly, divide both sides by 5. So x equals negative 2 over 5. So x equals 9 and x equals negative 2 over 5. Both of those are our solutions. All right, so example 2, we have x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0. So this should look familiar. The only thing that's different is now it's equal to 0. So when it's equal to 0, that's indicating that we need to solve for x. We want to figure out what x is equal to. So we want to do that by factoring. We know how to factor this, so we want to first draw our table. We're going to find out what multiplies to a positive 20 and adds to positive 9. So I'm going to write out all my factors of 20. I have 1 and 20, 2 of 10, 4 and 5. And we can see that 4 and 5 are my two factors. They're going to add to 9. So we can factor this to x plus 4 times x plus 5 equals 0. So we have to add the equals 0 at the end. So now we're going to use the zero product property rule to set both of my factors equal to 0 and solve for x. So first I'm going to take x plus 4 and set that equal to 0. And then we're going to take x plus 5 and also set that equal to 0. Once they're both set equal to 0, we're going to solve for x on each side. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides over here. So we get x equals negative 4. And now I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, so we get x equals negative 5. So those are my two solutions. So my solutions are x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 5. All right, so example 3 is x squared minus 12x equals 64. Now this one looks slightly different because it's not set equal to 0. I have x squared minus 12x is on the left-hand side of my equal sign, and then I have 64 is on the right-hand side. So we have to first set this equal to 0. So in order to set my quadratic equal to 0, I'm going to subtract 64 from both sides. So we're left with x squared minus 12x minus 64 is equal to 0. Now this should look familiar because remember the standard form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c, while now the only thing added is an equal 0. Alright, so once we've set our quadratic equal to 0, now we want to factor. So we're going to make our table. What multiplies to negative 64 and is going to add to negative 12. So my factors of 64 are 1 and 64, 2 and 32, 4 and 16, and 8 and 8. Well, when they add, my answer has to be negative, so my bigger numbers are going to be negative, and I can see that 4 and negative 16 are going to give me a negative 12. So our factored form is x plus 4 times x minus 16 equals 0. And again, our last step is to use the zero product property to solve. So I'm going to set each factor equal to 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and x minus 16 equals 0. And then we're just going to solve for 0 for both. So subtract 4 from both sides, we get x equals negative 4. And then on the right, I'm going to add 16 to both sides. So we get x equals positive 16. So our solutions for this is x equals negative 4 and x equals 16. Now both of those are solutions, so you have to make sure that you write them both out.